are Jewish noises?
In the case of the creative mind, it seems to me that the intellect has withdrawn from its watchers from the gates, and the ideas rush in pell-mell, and only then does it review and inspect the multitude. Your worthy critics, or whatever you may call yourselves, are he's fucking like shit talking. He's like, you worthy critics, or whatever you may call yourselves, are ashamed or afraid of the momentary and passing madness which is found in all real creators. Trademark.
Yeah.
The longer or shorter duration.
I can't believe that Hardluck doesn't like Sigmund Freud.
Right. Anyway, the longer or shorter duration of which distinguishes the thinking artist from the dreamer. Hence your complaints of unfruitfulness, for you reject too soon and discriminate too severely. Letter of December 1st, 1788. So this is actually Schiller that was saying that. That wasn't Freud. That was Schiller. There was a quote from Schiller. Mm-hmm. All right, so right here, starting with "and yet."
And yet, such a withdrawal of the watchers from the gates of the intellect, as Schiller puts it, such a translation into the condition of uncritical self-observation, is by no means difficult. Most of my patients accomplish it after my first instructions. I myself can do so very completely. If I assist the process by writing down the ideas that flash through my mind, the quantum of psychic energy by which the critical activity is thus reduced, and by which the intensity of self-observation may be increased, varies considerably according to the subject matter upon which the attention is to be fixed. The first step in the application of the procedure teaches us that one cannot make the dream as a whole the object of one's attention, but only the individual components of its content. If I ask a patient who is as yet unpracticed what occurs to you in connection with this dream, he is unable, as a rule, to fix upon anything in his psychic field of vision. I must first dissect the dream for him, then in connection with each fragment he gives me a number of ideas which may be described as the thoughts behind this part of the dream. In this first and important condition, then, the method of dream interpretation which I employ diverges from the popular, historical, and legendary method of interpretation by symbolism and approaches more nearly to the second or cipher method. Like this, it is an interpretation in detail, not en masse. Like this, it conceives the dream from the outset as something built up as a conglomerate of psychic formations.
Just watching you struggle with the page.
In the course of my psychoanalysis of neurotics, I have already subjected perhaps more than 1,000 dreams to interpretation, but I do not wish to use this material now as an introduction to the theory and technique of dream interpretation, for quite apart from the fact that I should lay myself upon the objection that these are dreams of neuropaths, so that the conclusions drawn from them would not apply to the dreams of healthy persons, there is another reason that impels me to reject them. The theme to which these dreams point is, of course, always the history of the malady that is responsible for the neurosis. Hence, every dream would require a very long introduction and an investigation of the nature and etiological conditions of the psychoneurosis, matters which are in themselves novel and exceedingly strange, and which would therefore distract attention from the dream problem proper. My purpose is rather to prepare the way by the solution of the dream problem for the solution of the more difficult problems of the psychology of the neurosis.
Problems.
But if I...
Just start throwing problems at the end of every fucking sentence, because he said a lot there.
Yeah, but if I eliminate the dreams of neurotics, which constitute my principal material, I cannot be too fastidious in my treatments of the rest. Only those dreams are left which have been incidentally related to me by healthy persons of my acquaintance, or which I find given as examples in the literature of dream life. I don't see why people think Carl Jung is so much fucking smarter than Sigmund Freud.
Okay, I don't get it either.
Unfortunately, in all these dreams, I am deprived of the analysis, without which I cannot find the meaning of the dream. My mode of procedure is, of course, less easy than that of the popular cipher method, which translate the given dream content by reference to an established key. I, on the contrary, hold that the same dream content may conceal a different meaning in the case of different persons, or in different connections. I must therefore resort to my own dreams as a source of abundant and convenient material furnished by a person who is more or less normal and containing references to many incidents of everyday life.
Say something funny like bucka buzza, bucka bucka, or wooza wuzzle.
Yeah. I shall certainly be confronted with doubts as to the trustworthiness of these self-analyses.
When he does that, he loses his career.
And analysis. In my own judgment, conditions are more likely to be favorable in self-observation than in observation of others.
Observation.
In any case, it is permissible to investigate how much can be accomplished in the matter of dream interpretation by means of self-analysis. There are other difficulties which must be overcome.
I mess up.
In my own inner self, one has a comprehensible aversion to exposing so many intimate details.
Didn't he say that when he was talking to that guy that was pretending to be a chick?
Yes, it was Carla.
Yeah.
Or Carlos, as his name probably was.
Of
I think
one's
he said
own
what his name
psychic
was.
life. And one does not feel secure against the misinterpretations of strangers. But one must be able to transcend such considerations. Tout psychologiste writes del
Localization.
Delquif est it's del bouf.
Freud, is it? Sorry to butcher the title. It's very interesting. The book is Freud is the author. The book is the interpretation of dreams.
Yeah. Est obligé de faire la vie mime bicis fabilicis si le croit par le jetir du genre sur
How many goddamn French words are in
problème
this?
obscure. And I may assume for the reader that his initial interest in the indiscretions, if a French person watched this, he'd be like, what the fuck
I
is wrong
would
with you?
assume that no one knows what the fuck you just said.
For the reader that his initial interest in the indiscretions which I must commit
It's funny though
will
when
very
he'll
soon
say like a French phrase. Like this is translated from German, but they don't translate when he says French phrases. Because like I get it, he's doing it. Like that is kind of like poetic or whatever, but like he does it a lot less than Jung. Jung does it like a lot.
Why are
You
you
mean
doing
Or no,
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche. I meant
Yeah.
Nietzsche. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I mix up the names of Jung and Nietzsche, even though I know the difference between the two of them.
yeah
Probably because you talk about both a lot, and it just kind of gets blended in my head.
yeah very soon
Your
give
head's a
way to an
blender.
exclusive engrossment in the psychological problems elucidated by them. I shall therefore select one of my own dreams for the purpose of elucidating my method of interpretation. Every such dream necessitates a preliminary statement, so that I must now beg the reader to make my interest his own for a time, and to become absorbed with me in the most trifling details of my life.
Become
for
absorbed
an
like Android
interest
17 and 18.
in the hidden significance of dreams imperatively demand just such a transference. Preliminary statement. In the summer of 1895, I had treated psychoanalytically a young lady who was an intimate friend of mine and of
Ooh,
my family.
saucy.
It will be understood that such complicated relations may excite manifold feelings in the physician, and especially the psychotherapist. The personal interest of the physician is greater, but his authority less. If he fails, his friendship with the patient's relatives is in danger of being undermined. In the case, however, the treatment ended in partial success. The patient was cured of her hysterical anxiety, but not of all her somatic symptoms.
We should try to finish this chapter and then switch to another book.
Yeah, we'll start reading that, and then I'll fucking tie my hair back so it's not a fucking problem anymore.
Yeah.
You put it in a man bun.
At that time, I wouldn't put it in a man bun. At that time, I was not yet quite sure of the criteria which denote the final cure of an hysterical case, and I expected her to accept a solution which did not seem acceptable to her. In the midst of this disagreement, we discontinued the treatment for the summer holidays. One day, a younger colleague, one of my most intimate friends, who had visited the patient Irma and her family in their country residence, called upon me. I asked him how Irma was and received a reply. She is better, but not quite well. I realized that these words of my friend Otto's, or the tone of voice in which they were spoken, annoyed me. I thought I heard a reproach in the words, perhaps to the effect that I had promised the patient too much, and rightly or wrongly I attributed Otto's apparent taking sides against me to the influence of the patient's relatives, who I assumed had never approved of my treatment. This disagreeable impression, however, did not become clear to me, nor did I speak of it. That same evening, I wrote the clinical history of Irma's case in order to give it as though to justify myself to Dr. M, a mutual friend who was at that time the leading personality in our circle. During the night, or rather in the early morning, I had the following dream, which I recorded immediately after waking. Dream of July 23rd to 24th, 1895. A great hall, a number of guests whom are receiving, among them Irma, whom I immediately take aside, as though to answer her letter.
Well, he answered her letter all right.
And to reproach her for... I like when he fucking interprets dreams, though, and he's like, it's clearly as a sign that you're madly in love with me. Take your clothes off.
Does he do that a lot?
Like, yeah, sometimes he does, like, with his patients. He's like, this dream must mean that you're in love with me. Her for not yet accepting the solution. I say to her, if you still have pains, it is really only your own fault. She answers, if you only knew what pains I have now in the throat, stomach, and abdomen, I am choked by them. I am startled and look at her. She looks pale and puffy. I think that after all, I must be overlooking some organic affection. I take her to the window and look into her throat. She offers some resistance to this, like a woman who has a set of false teeth. I think surely she doesn't need them. The mouth then opens wide, and I find large. It says I find large white spot on the right, and elsewhere I see extensive grayish-white scabs adhering to curiously curled formations, which are evidently shaped like the tribunal bones of the nose. I quickly call Dr. M, who repeats the examination and confirms it. Dr. M looks quite unlike his usual self. He is very pale. He limps, and his chin is clean-shaven. Now my friend Otto, too, is standing beside her, and my friend Leopold percusses her covered chest and says she has a dullness below on the left, and also calls attention to an infiltrated portion of skin on the left shoulder, which I can feel in spite of the dress. M says, there's no doubt that it's an infection, but it doesn't matter. Dysentery will follow, and the poison will be eliminated. We know too precisely how the infection originated. My friend Otto, not long ago, gave her, when she was feeling unwell, an injection of a preparation of propionic acid, trimethylamine. The formula.
Trimethylamine? That sounds kind of kinky.
The formula of which I see before me, printed in heavy type. One doesn't give such injections so rashly. Probably, too, the syringe was not cleaned. This dream has an advantage over many others. It is at once obvious to what events of the preceding day it is related and of what subject it treats. The preliminary statement explains these matters. The news of Irma's health, which I had received from Otto, and the clinical history, which I was writing late into the night, had occupied my psychic activities even during sleep. Nevertheless, no one who had read the preliminary report and had knowledge of the content of the dream could guess what the dream signified, nor do I myself know. I am puzzled by the morbid symptoms of which Irma complains in the dream, for they are not symptoms for which I treated her. I smile at the nonsensical idea of an injection of propionic acid and at Dr. M's attempt at consolation. Towards the end, the dream seems more obscure and quicker in tempo than at
Not quite my tempo.
the beginning. In order to learn the significance of all these details, I resolved to undertake an exhaustive analysis. The hall, a number of guests whom we are receiving. We were living that summer at Bellevue, an isolated house on one of the hills adjoining the Kallenberg. This house was originally built as these fucking pesky bees of entertainment, and therefore has unusually lofty hall-like rooms. The dream was dreamed in Bellevue. The dream was dreamed in Bellevue a few days before my wife's birthday. During the day, my wife had mentioned that she expected several friends, and among them Irma, to come to us as guests for her birthday. My dream then anticipates the situation. It is my wife's birthday, and we are receiving a number of people, among them Irma, as guests in a large hall of Bellevue. I reproach Irma for not having accepted the solution. I say, if you still have pains, it is really your own fault. I might even have said this while awake. I may have actually said it. At that time, I was of the opinion, recognized later to be incorrect, that my task was limited to informing patients of the hidden meanings of their symptoms, whether they then accepted or did not accept the solution upon which success depended. For that I was not responsible. I am grateful to this error, which fortunately has now been overcome, since it made life easier for me at a time when, with all my unavoidable ignorance, I was expected to effect successful cures. But I note that in the speech which I make to Irma in the dream, I am above all anxious, and I shall not be
Let me know
blamed
if you want me to take over again, because I finished mine.
for the pains which she still suffers. If it is Irma's own fault, it cannot be mine, should the purpose of the dream be looked for in this quarter. You know, it starts with fucking French shit, so.
Quarter. Where's the French?
No French.
It's not French. Quarter.
What is it?
Irma's complaints. Yeah,
Oh.
that's French, isn't it?
That is very French.
Irma's complaints. That doesn't sound French at all.
That would sound
I'm
more
sorry, the way it
German.
was written.
Pains in the neck, abdomen, and stomach. She is choked by them. Pains in the stomach belong to the symptom.
I
Complex
like that
of
the
my
way
patient.
Ethan said this makes it sound like fraud.
Yeah. I mean, granted, that's what a lot of people call Freud. Like, they'll call him Sigmund Freud as, like, an insult.
Yeah.
Like there's that Family Guy joke where Brian goes to the therapist and Peter's like, oh yeah, well, what did Sigmund Freud have to say? And he's like, he said he thinks I'm in love with someone. And he's like, oh my God, you can talk. It's the episode where Brian, like, realizes he has a crush on Lois.
Yeah.
My hand just.
But really, I do
weird
think it's
way.
self-projection when people call him a fraud, because it's literally just people being like, no, I can't possibly want to do these things that Freud says these dreams must mean, or whatever.
Yeah.
Valerie Flowers is the best YouTuber. I'm his biggest fan. He really entertains me with his videos. What a guy.
Hilarious and original. Hilarious and original.